Welcome to Bodies in the Post, where I speak to art makers, product creators, scientists, and revolution makers who help us rethink what it is to be human in these post-human times. Here, we get to know the humans behind the creations and their inner worlds that form the basis of what drives them. I'm your host, Lydia Kay, a researcher in this field. Hello and welcome back to Bodies in the Post. My guest this week, and the final guest for Season 1, is Dach Dermur. Dach is an artist and performer, a muse for fashion designers Rick Owens and Michele Lamy, who Dach has worked with for many years, and more recently, Dach became a face of MAC Beauty Cosmetics. But Dach may be best known to many for being an iconic DJ in London, working at the nightclub Fold and also events including Wraith and Kaos. These nights are for queer and subculture communities, and for many, Dach is known as mother in these spaces. We talk about the symbolism of this and how Dach embraces this nurturing role for people. So I interviewed Dach on a hot day back in August 2023, where they arrived impeccably dressed in leather, chunky Rick Owens boots, and a full face of flawless makeup. The commitment to the look is something that is an embedded part of Dach's identity. Dach has lived many lives, and we tried to squeeze in as many as we can here. They discuss growing up in a far-right religious household with a Baptist minister father and an abusive environment. Dach experienced trauma and violence and a perpetual feeling of not fitting into the town they grew up in, which was, ironically, a town called Normal in Illinois. We talk about Dach's experience of being forced to go to conversion therapy and rehabilitation after they ran away from home and started using drugs. We discuss Dach's Christian marriage, their biological child, and the years they spent suppressing their true identity, which led them back into a turbulent relationship with alcohol and drugs, something they battled for some time. But Dach has now been sober for the best part of a decade and lives their truest self on a daily basis. Dach is very open about the battle with all these demons and how they found freedom through art and using their own body as a canvas. So a warning here, of course, drugs and alcohol abuse are discussed, and topics of suicide and self-harm are touched on briefly. But what actually comes through in this conversation is Dach's positivity and enjoyment for the life they now live. They really have developed a deliberate and conscious way of living with radical compassion and kindness. Dach told me their friends call them the Queen of Tangents. And you know what? They're not wrong. But every tangent we went on led to another fascinating story. Dach has lived the most incredible life. Alongside their other jobs, they now also collaborate with fine art galleries and museums around London, which feeds their passion for creativity and identity expression in all forms. I've put links in the show notes to Dach's Instagram account and their website where you can buy their prints and t-shirts. Sadly, this is the last episode of Season 1 of Bodies in the Post, but I'm definitely going to be back for a Season 2, and I already have some really exciting guests lined up for interviews. I hope you enjoy listening to episode 12 of Season 1 with Dach Dermur. So I'd just like to say welcome. Thank you so much. To say that I'm excited to have you on this podcast is an absolute understatement.
Of course, my pleasure. It's an honor.
I feel like you're a living legend of London.
Oh, thank you.
And I was going to say the high priest or high priestess, but I feel like there's not a non-gendered word for...
Yeah, no, I'll take both. High priestess is something.
High priest brackets
Yes,
S.
yes.
And well, you're born in a place called Normal in Illinois.
Illinois. Oh, you've done your homework.
Well, of course.
Oh, gosh, embarrassed.
Which I feel like surely is serendipity.
Yes, it's very serendipitous, or maybe, I don't know, it's quite funny. But yeah, I was born in Normal, Illinois, and in Normal Hospital, and it's quite funny. My birth certificate has been often admitted into some of my exhibitions or performances just because it is quite funny. I don't know, it's cliche and it's funny and it's serendipitous, but I don't know, I think it's also very symbolic of who I've become and redefining what normal really is.
I was going to ask, do you think it's sort of played a part in propelling your desire to not be normal?
Probably. I don't know if consciously it did, but absolutely subconsciously. What was very conscious and present is, which I'm sure you're going to get to if you've done your homework, which I know you have. Normal also for me was, being born into a right-wing religious family, and my father being a right-wing Baptist minister and motivational speaker and very far, far extreme right. So for me, that was my norm. And so I think very quickly, and I'm jumping ahead very quickly, I learned how to be other versions of myself just to be able to exist and be happy. So that was kind of my norm. So I think
Wow.
to answer your question, it's thought at a very early age, probably since I was able to think or have words or realize what was happening. I created a world inside myself that was my norm, but it was absolutely different from what was around me.
Wow. So you kind of were feeling suffocated in
Oh,
this,
absolutely.
yeah, in your upbringing.
Yeah.
And it started in your head, this imaginative
Yeah.
place, I
yeah.
guess, like an escape.
Yeah, like an escape. And we can get into it later. It was an escape, but for what I do and who I am today, 24/7 is not to escape anything.
It's who you are.
It's my reality, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm not escaping from something or need it to be something that is a fantasy. It's actually my reality, but it's taken most of my life to get to this place. That safe space was in my head, and I didn't even have a safe space with a family member or a friend, because the norm for me was something that, it's to grow up in a household with this right-wing religion, hellfire and brimstone, and it's in Leviticus or somewhere. One of the first verses that I was very aware of was that men who are lovers of men will burn in the lake of fire forever. Having these feelings, I realized at a very early age that I was different from all of the other boys. I was being abused by my father because he wanted an all-American son and made it very clear at an early age that I was a mistake and not the son that he wanted. And I was an embarrassment. All these words that trigger us, like faggot and you're nothing and you're an embarrassment, sissy, really dictated and formed my opinion of myself, but also how to choreograph in a way something that was acceptable to not only my father, but those around me, because they had the same mentality as my father.
It's amazing because it must have been, what you're describing is really horrifying. And
Yeah.
it sounds almost like you've turned in the stereotypical things that are meant to be scary or horrifying. You've made them the beautiful, normal, quote unquote, normal and like loving appearance.
Actually, yeah, I haven't realized that. Yeah,
But
exactly.
you've flipped it. I just want to, for those who maybe haven't heard of you before or don't know what you look like, I want you to just tell us a little bit about your style and your fashion sense.
Oh gosh, where do I start? Because when people usually ask me that, I'm like, I'm just me. Or where does it come from? And I'm like, it's kind of a cohesive or a collection of just my life experiences. And there's so many things and people that inspire me, but I try to, and I say this humbly, try to be my biggest inspiration. I want who I am on the outside to be a gateway to who I am on the inside. It shouldn't be a wall. It should be very transparent. Using my skin as a canvas and kind of painting myself. It's usually my signatures. I'm very white, and that to me is just always something I always felt. It was a very white and black world in my head. There wasn't much color, and not in a drab way. It was just, it was so beautiful, this black and white world. And I think when I started gelling the outside and the inside together, which was years later, or actually when I was 18, when I ran away from home, which we'll go back into, and I deviated and got to this place around when I was 40 and was like severing the umbilical cord of like my past and family and anybody that had to do with that life, and be like, it's time for me to be this version of who I am. So back to, I'm always like, what was the question? But it's very, people call it avant-garde, people call it post-human. Anybody that knows me, I'm very much about humanity and being a human, but I don't really feel like a human. I really feel like this blossoming, this perpetual sense of becoming is this creature that is taking form. So that comes with the way I paint myself. It comes with the very, very white and usually these big black, intense eyes. Today I'm very red. I've introduced red into my palette, and it's...
By the white, you mean sort of, it's almost a bit traditional goth in sort of
Yes.
powdered white face.
Yes.
You've got no hair, you shaved your hair and your face.
Yes, I shave my hair every day because I have a lot of hair. My eyebrows. I used to pluck my eyelashes, but I just...
Ooh, ow.
Yeah, it's very painful. But because I feel almost very alien. Like it's, I always felt like I didn't fit. And now I just feel like it's just what I feel like, a creature, an alien from some other entity or universe or galaxy. And it's just kind of how I feel. And another reference that, besides the goth reference is Japanese Buto. They're very, very white, and the way that they age and just letting all the wrinkles and their skin age and then painting themselves white, white, their entire body. And then,
That's so interesting because I was going to say today to describe how you look today.
yeah,
You look fabulous, painted white,
Yeah.
and you're wearing a mesh kind of skin tight see-through top.
yes,
And on top of that, you've got a leather jacket, which is very structured and boxy. You're painted in a way that I was going to say there's a sort of sense of geisha about it.
yes,
You've got really, really red eyes, which are sort of spiked, leading into your nose, almost a little bit tribal. And then big painted red lips that connect up to the eyes as well. And it's very geometric. And, your look in general, I would say, it's hard to define, and maybe you don't want to define it.
no, we can.
But there is a gothic geisha-y. The geisha comes through as well in that there's a sense of vulnerability. And often in your pictures on Instagram, you're kind of almost like a bird. And the silhouettes and the crouches and the shape of your head, there's a kind of crow-like look about you sometimes. And the silhouettes of your clothes as well. You often have voluminous, bulging, beautiful fan-like clothing, which adds to that. And there's something going back to that creature element, which I think is an amazing thing to reclaim that and be like, I'm a
100%.
creature from another planet. I'm a creature, I'm a trans-species being.
Yeah.
But that comes through in that you have this otherworldly look, which is part ancient and part futuristic, that does make you feel very post-human. And I feel like when you walk down the street, people must think, what is this person? It's like beautiful and haunting and delicate all at the same time. Like you say, you started kind of dressing like this at around 40.
Yes.
So what were you dressing like before?
And it kind of and before I answer that, I want to kind of comment, everything that you just said absolutely resonates. These hues of a geisha and all of these things that can be scary, but also very vulnerable, because I am a very vulnerable person. And for that to come through and for that to resonate with you it's an honor for me to hear that, because it is very vulnerable. It's interesting that you took note of like these wings or like these shapes. And it's very much, my life was constantly searching for these wings that I felt were mine. But people who wouldn't see a crow or something else, they might see Batman or something. But I've always been a goth at heart. But it's interesting.
Before you go on, can I ask if you can take off your bangle?
Oh, yeah.
And your rings,
And
sorry.
my rings.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'll take mine off as well.
I'm getting in trouble.
So I asked what you looked like before. And
Yes.
hang on, so you were in the town of Normal.
Yes.
You grew up in a very horrifying and abusive household that you felt very unsafe in. You ran away when you were 18.
Yes. Yeah.
Where did you run to?
Just to note on that, when I was 12, our family moved from Normal to, it's called Plano, Texas, but it was a suburb of Dallas. And so I spent quite a few years of my life after migrating from Normal to Dallas, which was quite a big move for us. But this legalism and right-wing religion that, my father, you couldn't escape. And it was 24/7. I went to the Baptist school, the Baptist church, every 24/7. There was no escape from it. So going to Texas and Dallas, for me, everything just became a bigger problem because it was just on a larger scale. And it was still something that wasn't talked about, like being gay and then the abuse or the bullying, or it was at school, it was at home. And so
it was clear that you were gay before you came out, you mean, as into that's what other people were reading?
they were reading it, but yes, but it was almost because there was nobody like me, or if there was, no one ever talked about it. And with my father's mission of having an all-American son, it was, sending me to sports camps, to basketball camp, football camp, and then I didn't have an option
So that was hell, probably.
Yeah, and so to be forced, otherwise there'd be abuse. You don't have a say-so in being who you are, but also you have to surrender to be what you're not. And so I think to be bullied at school constantly and then be on these teams to where it's you faggot, you sissy, you're nothing, and then be physically and mentally and verbally abused
It's traumatizing.
It's traumatizing, and it's
It's traumatizing for an adult anyone.
Yes.
But you were a child.
Yeah.
And children are in need of love.
Love, and to be seen and to be accepted and to be like, to have compassion. That's why I'm so big on radical compassion. And I don't want my life experiences to be a summation of, in a negative way, who I am. It's like, I want them to set me free and make me have a choice to be like, that was my education. So I get to take that and be who I am today and hopefully use my life experiences to talk to young kids, to hopefully be a light or a voice that they can connect to. So I do feel like I have a responsibility.
I'm interrupting you here, but that sense of kindness and compassion is really obvious in you. And from other people who've met you, everyone always says you're so kind and you're so sweet and so generous with your time. And people who pass you on the street want photos and want to talk to you. And just on the way down here, you were telling me about a keynote speech that you did in May.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that sounds so powerful.
Yes, and I think it's to be invited by UCA to be a keynote speaker, and
UCA is
University of the Creative Arts, and it was to the graduates. And
so it was the graduation ceremony.
Yes, I've kind of dabbled in so many things from fashion to performance, and I think something I haven't done is, I'm good about one-on-one. I'm an overshare. Y'all can probably tell. And
it's good. This is a good format for
it is. Yeah, we'll be here till tomorrow or next week. But I think doing it in a public format, and it was by far one of the absolute most profound experiences I've ever had, to be able to stand in front of graduating students and be recognized as somebody relevant, or somebody that the dean of students and all of the teachers there were championing me to be there for the students. And
the keynote speech.
It's
the big one.
The big one. And then I was in conversation with this amazing woman, Terry Newman, who I'd met at Dover Street, and it was her idea, and she saw the whole thing through.
I know Terry.
She's the best. Terry Newman is the best. And she, at one of these dinners, saw right through me and my potential, and was like, we need to get you in front of the students and to talk in front of the students and be a lecturer. And I was like, really?
What was your speech like?
Because it was a Fashion Now conference, I talk a bit about fashion, but I also asked, I'm like, I don't want the whole thing to be about fashion. It's important for me to, all that's under the umbrella of my life experience and who I am today, and why I am who I am today and where I've come from. And fashion is a big part of that. I think all of the other things are as important, probably more important. So I talked a lot about my work in the fashion industry and working with Rick Owens and Michele Lamy, and being a fashion stylist and a fashion muse, and doing just many things in the fashion world. And then I segued into my experience as a human, and was just really honest with the students about my relationship to drug abuse, and which was 30 years. I'm 7 years sober, which is,
wow, congratulations.
in and of itself, a miracle. Thank you. One of my biggest accomplishments. And so it changed my life. It saved my life. So I talked about my drug addiction and overcoming drug abuse, and then just my dance with suicide and self-harming, and my relationship with my father, and my estranged relationship with my biological son, and kind of just wanted to paint a picture of all of bullet point these experiences in my life who have made me who I am, but I've also had to work through a lot of trauma to get to who I am today. So I'm bringing it here today to this interview. I brought it to that speech at Fashion Now.
And you said that there were over 100 of them queuing to talk to you and asking you for advice. They were feeling trapped.
Or what's it feel like to be free? And can you help? Like, it blew my mind. And so to do the talk is one thing, but to have the personal contact, the eye contact, the hug, all of it is such a big part of that.
It sounds also something that maybe you didn't, I'm guessing here, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But you didn't necessarily expect your career to lead you in that
kind
of direction. To have a queue of young, fresh-faced graduates coming up to you and asking you, how can I learn to be more like you and be free?
And be free. And it's not, and again, it's about the message. It's not about me. It's about, how can I be free? What can I do? And it's about the mental health. And we're not, as much as we do nightlife and do all these things, it made me realize in that experience that I am really striving to do more things during the day and do these talks, or being available. Hopefully in the future I can be available at universities for the kids to come and talk to. It's these sober spaces where kids need to be seen by somebody that they either look up to or they find relevant or inspired by. It humbles me that I'm even that relevant for them to look up to. So it's important for me to realize that I have a responsibility to it, but it's the sober spaces during the day where we can have these one-on-one conversations and look at them. How is your mental health, or how can I help you be a better creative? And so that talk in and of itself has kind of changed the journey of what I want to look forward to and do with my career as an artist and a human.
We should find you next on, like, the motivational speaking
Believe
circle
me,
in America.
It's happening.
You and what's his face?
Tony Robbins. No, yeah.
You and Tony Robbins.
Come on, I want my TED Talk.
I would go to your talk above Tony Robbins' talk
thank you.
any day.
Hear that, Tony?
Well, what an inspiration.
Thank you.
We've touched on it a little bit, as in you're a DJ.
Yes.
I would say I would define you as an artistic practitioner, because...
You know what? I'm using it because people are like, you're a DJ and I don't have a word. I like this.
Because you are very, you do multiple things. You DJ a lot in the night scene, subcultural night scene in East End London mostly?
It's mostly, but it's broadened. It's kind of everywhere now. I'm doing East, West. I'm doing some festivals. I'm doing a lot of stuff at Fold. I do a party, Kaos London. It's chaos that moves around. Kaos London with my partner in crime, Lee Adams, who's been doing chaos for 20 years. And then we've been doing it together. I've been doing it with Lee for the last 10 years. And it's an amazing underground techno. I hate calling it a techno party because it's really a lot of people that I know in London came out of this Kaos London community. So it's really a queer community. It's all the things that, to me, it's church. It's a religious experience.
I was about to say, it's like a worship
It's a worship. And it's for me to...
It's about the community,
it's a community,
like any church.
Yeah. For me, that was very important because it's... I was so poisoned by the church and doctrine and religion that I have redefined it. And these institutions like Kaos London or Wraith, what, Parma does that I'm a part of, these to me are religious institutions that absolutely change the community. Yeah. And they are a space for people to come in. And of course, it's just more than a party. It's actually an experience. It's a safe place, and it's a movement. It's a life experience, and to be with the like-minded people and creatures, it's so exciting to me to have these spaces to be able to expand and grow and perform, dance, all of it, and it's it bleeds into the day to day. And so, what am I again? An artist practitioner.
Yeah,
so,
an artistic practitioner. So,
yes.
And you are very involved in the Tate, the Courtauld.
Yes.
Do stuff with the Royal Academy of Art?
I have before. And that's the exciting thing for me too, is take what we do out of the nightlife format and integrate it into a gallery or exhibition space. Because then to be able to walk around there as a living piece of art or moving piece, like a sculpture is, if it's a new exhibition, to go and respond to the art while people are drawing you and while I interact with the art.
You interact with the audience.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're moving from the space of kind of underground club culture into also fine art, and the two are inseparable in a sense.
And yes,
the fine art world is, I think, in a good way, becoming less elitist, but it still is very elitist.
It is, but it's so important for them to open it up, especially
exactly.
What I just was able to do at the V&A, especially.
I saw some fantastic videos of you strutting up and down in the V&A with a humongous
feather hat on. Which, full circle, is this amazing student that came to, Sarah, who came to the Fashion Now graduate. Yeah, Fashion Now conference as one of the graduates. I met her there, and then I DJ'd for the grad show, and Sarah showcased her work there. And then the third leg to this complete full circle was I wore her designs, were absolutely extraordinary. This feather headpiece, which was also
stunning.
Yes.
It's like a prop.
Yes. Yeah, it's incredible. And so to have this relationship with the students that starts, that covers all these bases, and then to be able to wear their creation.
To wear their stuff,
was amazing. So this was a party during Pride. It's when
at the V&A.
V&A, part of V&A late. So there was kind of something going on in each one of the rooms. And so I was walking around and just doing impromptu performances. And I think being able to be treated as a work of art, but then also respond to the art, but then have a space to perform in that's fine art and not a nightclub, it just gives it a different context. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that are coming to these spaces, you will never find them in a nightclub. And I think it's important as humans and as queer artists and part of the queer community. And I think, no, it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't feel comfortable because it is it doesn't always work with the reaction. Most of the times in a gallery space it does, but if you're outside on the street or other spaces, I just think we have a calling to educate people who are maybe not going to see us in any other spaces. But it's exciting me to find these fine art spaces and gallery spaces to perform in, to also have conversations in, because if people ask, you have a sober space where you can be like, this is what I do, but what's behind it?
And I guess it's the way you look starts a lot of conversation.
It does.
And probably confronts a lot of people who need to open their mind.
Yes.
So being able to talk to people and probably change their mind about what their assumptions of you might be.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
It is. And I think it
must be very satisfying as well.
It's you know what, I think it's all of it. It's satisfying, it's rewarding, it's humbling, it's exhausting, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's shocking, it's surprising. And I think because I'm all about contradiction, and most of the time if people are like, oh, you're so scary, or I thought you were scary, you're actually nice, I'm like, of course I'm nice. Why wouldn't I be nice? I think to have a couple minutes for a conversation to happen where you can be like, no, I'm this, or to open somebody's mind to think differently, or to take home something different. That's why I usually always, the energy's right, I always say yes to a picture, because they will remember that. And so I try to always tell the kids, just be patient with people, and it's kind of exhausting, and
I was going to say, it must be exhausting.
Yeah, and not everybody's going to get it. And there are people on the street who aren't, especially if there's a group of kids or there's group mentality, but it's, I've been, as many of us have, I've been hate crimed on the street. I've wound up in the hospital having my face sewn back together, fighting for my life because I've been...
Was that in London?
The life-threatening ones were, I was fighting for my life, were actually in New York, where I was attacked by a gang with metal objects. And just when I was younger, it would happen quite a bit. In that interim, when I was a teenager, which I don't think answered your question, was ran away from home, and there were like 3 years where I had this point of self-discovery and was taken to a new wave club and really started, I found my queer community and found my sexuality and came out and found the music and all of these things. And I had kind of a 3-year tutorial of being me and finding that space, but it also came with a lot of sexual violence and drug abuse and being in and out of prison and just being in a lot of trouble because there was no cap to it. I'd spent 17, 18 plus years in this holy bubble. And when I got out and had the life experience and realized there was this community out there and I didn't know how to say no, it was just yes, yes, yes to everything.
To like hedonism.
Yeah. And so I think once that stopped because of either being in trouble with the law or being in and out of drug rehabs or these near-death experiences because of suicide and self-harming, because I just hadn't dealt with all of it. It's a long story, but my father got back involved and I got sent to conversion camp therapy.
Oh my God. How old were you then?
That's when I was 20, 21.
So your dad tracked you down.
Yes.
And had you already been in prison at that point?
Yes.
And what was it that got you put in prison?
It was just like drug abuse, selling drugs.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I feel the Oprah interview. Drug abuse and prostitution and robbing places to have money for food and drugs. And this is when I was 18, 19, 20 and just doing things that were the fight for survival, but also these things. It was these life experiences that are part of who I am. To navigate through that and be very young and not know what I was doing, it got really, really dark.
When your dad came and found you and sent you to conversion...
It's conversion therapy, drug rehabilitation and conversion therapy.
When you went into that, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, I'm going to play along?
Yes.
And just pretend.
And I felt like it was kind of over, like all of it, because it was quite dark. To be ripped out of that world that I'd just gotten a taste of being who I was and being gay and queer, and a lot came with that. I was still finding my grounding and my footing of being who I was, and it felt real. Had these gay experiences and life experiences that really defined who I knew that I was. It was just, it's like a kid in a candy shop and pulling a china cabinet. It was just everything.
And dealing with all of the trauma that
And dealing with all of the trauma and then repeating that trauma through the relationships. And then to be ripped out of that back into this Baptist world of the rehabilitation and conversion therapy and all of that were part of the Baptist theology and also part of, as I say, when I got in trouble with the law, it was like my father was very much a part of it. And like the attorneys and lawyers all went to my father's church. So it was very heavy-handed in a 5-year probation period to where I had to surrender to all of that, or I would have gone back to jail and it would have been a whole other life. So my father coined this whole rehabilitation thing to where I really didn't have a choice but to go
It's still a
along
prison in
with
a
it.
sense, isn't
It
it?
was a prison.
But I guess if it helped you, did it help you get off drugs?
It did. I did go back into it many times in my life, but at that point, it did stop the drugs. You know, the center was in the middle, actually in the Catskill Mountains in log cabins in the middle of nowhere, this rehabilitation. You don't have access.
Nowhere to go.
No.
So were you in there with other people who were also it was a conversion therapy center for other people in the same situation?
And also a drug rehabilitation
Okay.
center. So
I
it
always
was,
think those places must be rife for people just shagging.
no, but it's rough. It's,
If you've got it's often gay sons, isn't it? Well, they do it
Yeah.
with gay daughters as well, but gay sons who get sent to conversion therapy
Mm.
school. I think you're sending them all to the same place where they're all hormonal,
Yeah,
sexually
yeah.
frustrated, gay. Like, of course they're going to...
yeah.
It
This one
just
was,
seems very silly.
it does seem silly, you know, because you're like putting us all together and it's like, what do you expect? But it's very militant how they separate you. And because there were so many different people there for different types of rehabilitation, they would try to section you.
Okay.
Like if you were effeminate and there for being
They'd put you
gay,
with someone else.
which doesn't help
No.
at all.
So then when you finished the conversion therapy, what happened after that?
So as the drug rehabilitation conversion therapy was, I can't remember how long, I went back to living with my parents
Right.
to finish I didn't really have a
The
choice.
probation.
It was probation.
Right. So that went up to 5 years. So
I
you
think
were
it was
about
5. I think a lot of things I've either blocked out
Right.
or forgotten or just out of protecting myself, but I think it was around, 5 years.
So then you were kind of in your mid to late 20s.
Mm.
And then did you move to New York?
Eventually I did. So at this point I was back in Dallas. I was still figuring out a lot because in that time of rehabilitation and them trying to de-gay me and all of these other things, I was pretty quiet. I did not open up because I did not trust anybody. And, you know, these aren't trained therapists. It's lay people of the church that, you know, are trying to offer you scripture on why you can't be gay and shouldn't be gay and you need to rehabilitate with drugs and you could listen to no music, you know, especially the music I listen to now. Oh my God. But no, there was no what they call secular rock music. It was, you know, I was growing up, we weren't allowed to listen to music or go to the movies or have any type of worldly type things. It was all forbidden.
You're like deprived.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny or isn't it interesting now that you have created this, like when you were talking about these young people queuing up to speak with you and people in the street wanting to talk to you, you're having this total ethos about kindness, compassion, being true to yourself. You're DJing and these underground clubs where you feel like it's a place of worship and safety for this queer community. In my head, I keep hearing that phrase, you're doing God's work, like, which is obviously not the right phrase, but
No,
you're
but it
doing,
is. It
you're
is the
doing
right
very, you're
phrase.
living like and you're sober, like you're living a very loving, kind and Christian, quote unquote, Christian
Yes.
life when that's what you were kind of forced into, but in the most violent and oppressive way, which was abusive and traumatizing.
100%.
And you've gone the other end of the spectrum in that people often use the word satanic when they see people dressed as
They
extreme
do.
goths.
We get that a lot. Ham and I get that.
That
quite
it's
a
like
bit.
you're from Satan when it's actually the total opposite of what
Yeah.
you guys are doing and what you guys are preaching. You're
No, it's
preaching
true.
love and kindness.
100%. And it's
such a kind of oxymoron of
It
what,
is an
what
oxymoron.
your parents were trying to do.
Yeah, to where I feel, and it's amazing to hear you say that and articulate it in such a way because I feel like I'm doing God's work, you know, and it's who God is to you or to us, and you know, to be called Satan, you know, satanic and all that, fine, but it's, you know,
Doesn't mean anything, really.
No, and it's, you know, if you do, it's fine. It's like, you
It's
know, then people,
misguided.
it's misguided. It's quite the opposite. So to see these parallels and to see these oxymorons and to see, you know, even to be called mother in the scene is one of the biggest honors I could have because I think having the trauma from my childhood and to be able to navigate that trauma with this therapeutic role as a mother, and then also because there's many years that aren't accounted for, but you know, I spent about 10 more years still figuring myself out and still not believing that I deserved happiness, you know, after I got out of all that, because I hadn't really done the internal work there. I was just saying yes
Can I just interrupt for a second when you
Yeah.
say about being called mother?
Yeah.
For those who might not know, can you explain what it is to be called mother in the queer community and the symbolism of that?
Just to be nurturing and to be somebody where people come to for nurture and healing and caring and this tangible kind of love, to where for me a mother has unconditional love, and that's something I sought my whole life. I do have an amazing relationship with my mother, which is a gift, and it's something
so
that's
good.
always had to be hidden because of her relationship with my father. And she was able to come to London a few years ago, and it's when I finally made sense to my mother,
Wow.
having this context here and not the context of religion.
So she came here secretly.
Yeah. And so it's
Does she know that you are mother?
Yes, yeah, it's quite something. So I think for me, it's the highest calling. So for me, the symbolism of now being called mother, and then, one of the versions of myself that I was still trying to work through is I ended up getting married, and I have a biological son who's 27, and we're still trying to figure each other out. He's still under the heavy doctrine of religion and being gay isn't right and it's a sin. And then how I express myself, a lot of it does not make, his name is Lars, does not make sense to Lars. And so he's not.
So he's 27. Were you in a forced marriage?
I was married, yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's.
And it was part of the church.
It was, yeah. It's another long story. It was kind of a best friend, and I'm very open to my sexual partners and relationship. I'm more about the energy and the person. I've discovered that now, but then it was very much about, you need to be in
a heterosexual normative relationship.
And so when we had Lars, it was just something that I never dreamt that I would actually have a son. So when that was a byproduct of this relationship with his mother, it was something that I realized that I had a do-over. I had an opportunity to have a healthy, functional friendship with a bloodline that I had never had before. So it was quite jarring because he was also entering a very unhappy marriage it was a lie, and it was not functioning as it should. And so when Lars was born, I just felt like I had a responsibility and an opportunity, but it also came with, and this sounds very horrible because I love him, he's my son, but it came with kind of a nail in a coffin to me, to where I would never, ever be able to live my true authentic self, and I needed to put that away to raise a child that I had brought into the world. So
you had to kind of deny your sense of self in order to be his father.
Yes. And so I did that for 10 years.
And so that whole time, you were kind of dressing normally, you were in a normative marriage,
Yeah.
seemingly.
I was always the odd one out, dressing kind of normal.
You always looked different, you mean?
Yes. Yeah, I still got the sissy faggot. It was always there, and it was kind of my own demons as well. But I was doing it for Lars, but doing it again just because I felt this responsibility. Stay together for the kids and the American dream and everything that his mother wanted, and everyone around me. The first time my father was ever approved of me or any of my siblings. And it was devastating, but then there was this sense of I brought a son into the world. It's something I never thought that I would be capable of doing. So it was quite a lot to navigate, but it's, again, I became very depressed. I shut down, and we were just staying together for Lars and putting on the whole show and the white picket fence, and it's what...
Did Lars's mother know?
Oh, yeah, she knew even before we were married. Yeah. So
in a way, at least that must have helped that she knew.
Until she wanted something different. She became a version of my father, to where it's something shifted, when we had this son together, and she wanted me to de-gay and kind of be like the other dads and not be who I really was.
Right.
That's when the paint started cracking, the fence started crumbling, and I was like, I couldn't do it. And so I was in yet another scenario to where I needed to be somebody else's version of me for them to love me, to be their partner, and to be an accepted father to their son. And it destroyed me. I felt like such a failure, and that it was my fault that I had brought Lars into the world of something that I wasn't, and that I was going to pass on something to him that I had. It was a different kind of trauma. The amazing thing to me was Lars and I, everyone knew took Lars with me everywhere, and it's I was doing a lot in the fashion world and was a creative director and stylist. To have those first few years with Lars was quite something.
Up until he was 10. And you say you were working in the fashion industry then, and you
Yeah.
take him with you, and
On photo shoots and to all my styling gigs, everybody knew Lars. It was
he knows who you are now.
He does. So the last time I saw him, he was 10, but we parted ways when he was 8. And I always shared with Lars, I know he's very young, but I shared with Lars a lot about my drug addiction, about me being depressed and where I'd come from, and me navigating sexuality and being gay and all of these things. I wanted him to learn that at an early age and learn it for me, but it was quite hard to navigate because I wasn't happy. And so once Lars kind of understood what was happening with his mother and I, and that it was just a show, and when he recognized the abuse that was happening between his mother and I, and that she hated me, and there was a lot of verbal and physical abuse, it's when I said, I have to step out. It's not fair to Lars, or I won't be around. I don't want him to, for me to take myself out. I'm not going to do that to my child. So I felt, if I'm going to live right by the example that I want Lars someday, even if I'm not around later in my life to live by, I want him to know that I made the decision to live my true authentic self and to be who I was. And because that wasn't accepted where I was and nobody wanted a part of that, I had to move on. And I hope Lars someday remembers there's so much, because that was 17 years ago. He gave me the permission to moved to New York. I kind of stayed around just to make sure he was okay, and he was over the last few years.
Now?
We are. So I think once I went to New York and he was coming to visit me, and I was working for Rick Owens, and I was really, really, then it was the white face, when I was really like, I left it all behind with kindness, be like, I love you all. I'm going to go be me. A lot of hate came with it from their side, and I'm not. Just like I tell the kids now, I'm not going to exchange hate for hate now, and I didn't want to do it with my bloodline either. It was so important for me for Lars to have, as everybody, an authentic example of what it is to be who you are with love. And so for a few years, Lars was allowed to come visit me in New York until his mother and my family and her family saw the difference. He was coming back, being around my gay friends, and he was becoming very different. For 2 years, I had Lars, and walking down the streets of New York and me being me, he loved it. And so
I'm sure he really remembers that as well.
I hope so. And so I think, to be taken to court as an unfit father for being gay was really hard for me. So I lost all rights to my son because I gave everything up for Nicole except the rights to Lars, because I really wanted him to know who I was. And so when that got taken away from me, the last time I saw him was when he was 10. So that was 17 years ago. I fell back into those dark habits. I haven't talked about it in a while, but I wear it on my sleeve. I want no secrets. I want people to know, because it's going back into it, really hard with crystal meth and doing all of these things then haunted me while I was in New York. And then after New York, I left to do residency in Belgium with Designers Against AIDS for a year.
Designers Against AIDS?
Yes, DAA.
Wow. How did you get into that then? If you were already using and in a place where often you're not able to kind of work or...
And I was abusing alcohol as well. A lot of it was secretly.
So you were functioning?
I was functioning.
Wow, okay.
And it was somehow like drinking a liter of vodka a day and doing a lot of uppers, trying to navigate around it, not for people to know. It was quite hard.
And you were working with Rick Owens at this point?
Back in New York when I was navigating my drug addiction, yes. It was,
right.
Yeah.
And then... Did Rick Owens know?
At the time, no.
So you kind of kept it from everyone?
From everyone. And on that note, it's, Rick and Michele have been such a big part of championing my best self, my sobriety, my health, and have cheerleaded me every ounce of the way.
Well, you're like their muse now.
Yes,
well,
they've been so wonderful. And for them to be, just an intricate part of my sobriety, but also my journey, just giving me unconditional love has been incredible. And it's just like with my chosen family and those around me, it's like they are the infrastructure and pillars of my existence, who saw my potential from the beginning and knew, whether they knew my darkness or they experienced whatever, they never, ever, ever gave up on me. So that's
family.
That's family. So I think New York, those last few years in New York got really dark. Then I had this amazing opportunity with Designers Against AIDS in Antwerp. And I had never left the States before, which was a really big step. And so I've been here, I think about 12, 13 years. So it was the day I left for Antwerp. I was in Union Square, had my little Yoji Yamamoto bag with my passport and my airline ticket. And that's when I was hate crooned by that group of men with the metal objects. And it was interesting.
Oh
It was the night before I was going to go abroad for the very first time.
So then you couldn't go, obviously.
I had a miracle. I did. It was, I mean, they split my face wide open. And in New York, for some reason, like nobody got involved. Everybody watched. And so I spent all evening and night in the hospital being sewn back together and them doing all of these tests for concussions and internal bleeding. And my best friend at the time, I let him make the decision for us to attempt for me to get on the airplane. But anyway, it was interesting because we put hair and like a hat covering up the right side of my face. And so I got on the plane. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made to be in that state and for that to have just happened less than 24 hours later and then to leave the States for the first time and I didn't know anybody at the facility at Designers Against AIDS. And obviously when I hit air pressure, it was,
I didn't even think about that.
I kind of broke the law. You're not, with such a large head wound, it's illegal to fly like that. So
when you left the hospital, they didn't know that you were going to fly?
No. So when I got to DAA, it was quite an experience. You're there for volunteer work, and they really had to take care of me for the first few months. And then after healing, I was able then to be a part of this amazing community at Designers Against AIDS and this amazing facility, and then part of the artist community in Antwerp. And then a year later is when I got on an overnight bus, and came to London.
What was the reason to come to London?
I was coming to visit friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Who are your friends here?
At the time, it was this amazing artist called Andre J. and my friends Pascal and Tony Greenland, who were working for Rick Owens, or they're architects that did a lot of the Rick stores, and they're the ones that had actually scouted me to work for Rick and Michele in New York.
You went to visit them and landed in London 13 years ago.
I think it was about 13 years ago, and here I am.
If you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe or press the follow button to get the new episodes. And take a second to like, rate, and review the podcast because it helps other people find it. You could also share this episode with someone who you think would enjoy it. What did you feel like when you got to London?
That I belonged and that it was home.
What was it about London that made you feel like that?
Everything. It was a feeling I could never articulate. I think words would always make small the emotions. It was this mammoth, grand-sized canyon feeling of being overwhelmed. It was so awe-inspiring. Because again, from not traveling, all of my life experiences were simulated through a virtual reality of my friends traveling. So I was so busy either living so many other versions of myself or dealing with trauma or drug addiction or whatever. When I look at it, and especially being the human and artist that I am, it would shock most people like, but you haven't traveled. And so I think it almost became this fear or this, I know now, I really believe that the universe is never early and it's never late, and things happen as they happen. And I believe it happened when it was supposed to. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that when I came to London, oh my goodness, it was just, so I'd already imagined, and people had told me my whole life, Japan or London, I'm telling you, it's your home. Not only will you make sense, people love you, you'll be well received. And New York, I had amazing experiences, but there was just this
Some of them less so.
Yes, some. But there were beautiful experiences as well. But yeah, I just knew. I knew within 48 hours that whatever it took, I was going to make it happen, and this was my new home. And I'm telling you, it has been giving back to me for over 12 years. Even repeating bad habits, and I hadn't kicked the addiction. It's on again, off again, and again I went back deep into it, which I realize now I want to be an apostle of living life with no regrets and no resentment, because to reformulate those into a perpetual life education and making myself a better person because of my life experiences. And just like the situation that happened to me in New York, I needed to heal so I could give back. They don't deserve it, but there's a reason they did that to me. There's always a backstory to everything. So
yeah,
it's important to forgive. You have to.
A lot of people kind of become their trauma, and they can't
No,
let
they
it
do.
go. And
Ever.
it dictates their whole life. But if you can look at life in that way and think these hard lessons it's easy to say it rather than there are lots of people in the world who are like, it's actually impossible to do that for them. But
Yeah.
to be able to take your trauma and the shit things you've been through and make it a part of you that it's positive.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing to do.
Thank you. It's miraculous. And I think all the examples around me were the opposite. It was people who were living their trauma, who became their trauma, who became really dark and evil people. And so my character is more important than my artistry, and to live a life above reproach. It's not always easy, but to give these people who don't deserve it, who even talking about my life, that's a drop in the bucket. A lot of people have experienced in their life way darker trauma than I have. People who've lost their lives for it, and so we live in a world where that's the norm. Look at the situation in the States. It's way worse. I don't want to live in a world to where I have to be worried about going out the front door because we don't have a choice. We have to live in the world that dictates putting stipulations on self-expression. I don't want to be told how to look, but we are. So I want to be part of the solution if we have to be a part of the system. I think London as a whole, even though we do have to navigate sometimes around aggressive behavior, the broad vastness of acceptance and love and people.
I guess as well, there's a history of countercultural movements in London.
There really is.
Which there is, because of that history, I think there's a kind of generational awareness.
There is a generational awareness.
Kind of punk and goth has been around
for so long.
In terms of your sobriety.
Yes.
So you're now sober for 7 years.
Yes.
What an amazing feat, because so many people are beaten by that fight. And you're also working in the nightlife scene. How do you navigate that? And did you have to take some time out of that?
I did actually, and thank you for asking that and also celebrating it with me. I became addicted to where you have this rise, but then you go back down again because you don't feel like you deserve it, or you're not capable of success, or you're not capable of being this person that you hoped you are. So I think 7 years ago when I felt ashamed, and the more people knew of the struggle, or I just felt like I just got embarrassed. I used to really give myself a hard time, and so I've learned to embrace that version of me and not get in the way of it.
But a lot of people who become sober talk about that overwhelming sense of shame and these memories and things they said or they did. But you've got to remember you were doing the best you could given the situation and the circumstances.
Yeah.
And you were just trying to survive.
I was trying to. Thanks for saying that.
You can't blame yourself or feel shame for making those decisions.
Thank you. And I think I finally realized that about 3 years ago, and a couple of my performances that I've done, I bring all of my life experiences to it. And it's called The Eye of the Beholder. And I platformed this creature that I felt was a part of the trauma that kept interrupting me, that was part of my darkness.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah, and so I gave the platform to this creature that was still very me, but the whole performance, The Eye of the Beholder, was embracing this version of me and giving it love because they needed love too. And so it was so healing and just freed me of so much shame. And so I think 7 years ago when I kind of made it known that I'm like, this is it. I just need to draw a line under life. And somebody asked me to give them 24 more hours, and I did. And that's why I'm still here. And it was a friend who introduced me to an amazing woman named Vanessa and Doctor. And so meeting this incredible woman named Vanessa who invested in me, and it was
an angel.
A friend of a friend who she had done the same thing for and knew of me through social media. And she's an addiction psychiatrist, among many other things, and took me as a personal case and kind of wanted to create solitude for me here because I'm quite visible in London, but wanted me to have a space to where nobody knew where I was. But also because I was kind of living from place to place or squats or all this, she wanted to give me a beautiful space to recover and to detox in. And so she put me up in really nice hotels like the Ace Hotel, the Citizen M Hotel.
But she really does sound like an angel.
No, I used to call it going from the gutter to the penthouse, literally. For months we're in these amazing hotel suites.
Was it her who said, give me 24 hours?
It was the friend who introduced it. Yeah. And so to live in solitude in these beautiful hotel suites for months, she would bring me iPads and sketchbooks and fabrics, things where I could have this creative bubble to start the therapy and recovery of sobriety. It was a very long road, but it was being away from being away from nightlife, being away from drugs, being away from energies where it was easy to say yes to.
How long were you out of the nightlife scene?
My commitment and relationship with Vanessa was a year. And so living in a hotel, I think it was 4, 5, 6 months. And then I lived in a live workspace, which she supported me with for 6 months. And so it was through this relationship and through this solitude that I was really able to find grounding, so I went a year without any substances and I couldn't even go a minute. And so I slowly went back into nightlife. I needed to take baby steps because I wasn't ready to be around it yet. And it was quite tricky because it was also my bread and butter and also my community because, people are like, where's Dach? Where's
and
Chad?
It's very difficult to, a lot of people who go sober, they sort of can't be around that full stop.
Yeah,
or they tell themselves they can't.
Yeah.
So you kind of had to retrain yourself.
I had to retrain, and I think it's both. And I felt though I had this amazing victory, I was also mourning quite a great loss because I felt like it was something that I would never be able to enter again. And so it's not just nightlife.
You kind of miss it.
Where I'm called mother, but it was like, I missed it. It was like my livelihood for like 10, 11 years in London. It was like, and so I realized it was important for me to navigate that or just kind of go easy with it until I felt ready because I already had a year under my belt, which to me was like, oh my goodness. But to stop and then kind of to dabble in again wasn't an option for me. It was like nothing, absolutely no. Why would I take a step in a direction of something that haunted me for most of my life? It was not an option for me to get better and then to take it recreationally. It was not going to be a part of my life. I wanted to stay true to this commitment, whatever it took. So I slowly took baby steps and took gigs, and everybody knew. I made sure.
That's good.
Once I got back in the scene, people see you go down. They also see you go up. I wanted people to see my rise. Everybody had seen my fall. It was important for me to.
I'm back, bitches.
I'm back, bitches. And so whatever it took to be back and tell people, this is what I need. This is what I can't have. And so.
Yeah, look at me working, thriving, living.
Yes, and to set boundaries, so people knew what they couldn't say. I was very adamant on setting boundaries.
And everyone was respectful of that.
100%. That's the thing, the reception.
That's really beautiful.
To have me back. And it was difficult because I did have to say no to some energies or to some situations that I knew weren't healthy for me. And it's hard for me, and I never want to hurt anybody's feelings.
But sometimes relationships are kind of built or codependent on this.
Yeah. Sobriety isn't for everyone. It was just my thing. So I think once I got back into nightlife and I was able to take baby steps, I couldn't always be around it, but it took me a few years to be able then, okay, I'm fully back, and it's a miracle and I think a gift from the gods that in my recovery, the temptation and the desire and the thirst for it has gone away. Knock on wood, because I feel for so many people that I know that
deal with the cravings
every single minute of every day. So for me to be able to go back into these spaces and navigate it and be mother, it's very important for me to be able to be a part of it too. So I'll have it in front of me, or if people ask 3 times to where they don't maybe know my situation, it goes in the toilet. If they're not hearing, no, I'm like, okay, this goes in the toilet. Do you hear me now? But to be part of it, or, when it comes out, I'll tell people what they can and can't. I'm total mother when it comes to that. But for me, I've become the drug that I've always craved. And to be high on life and to be high on existence and to be able to go into a party and go from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. on the goodwill of being alive and to feel the adrenaline. I am exuberant with joy because I get to be here. I'm the exception to the rule. When you realize on paper that you're the exception to the rule and the exception to the textbook, that I shouldn't be here. And so I feel like I have a responsibility to myself and everybody that's invested in me to keep paving the way for all of those who are doing it. And so for me,
you show it's possible as well for other people who
100%.
who might be scared of losing community. You show that it's possible to be sober and still be part of the community. And because often, not that in any way the queer community is only about that, but young communities generally as well, whatever sexuality or whatever gender expression, that's how you kind of make lots of friends and bond at the beginning
100%.
of life, going out, getting drunk, dancing the night away. But having those spaces for queer communities is also kind of, like you say, it's a safe space.
It is.
And it does come with what comes with nightlife, which is, you know, a lot of people who might think, oh, I want to be sober, but I also don't want to lose this.
Exactly.
You're showing them that it's
Yeah,
possible.
it's possible. And I think that's really important because it took me a while to navigate that specifically and be like, you know what, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And it's not everyone's
I don't have
journey.
to choose.
I don't have to choose. So once I felt, you know what, I still want to go and I want to be there, go to an after party or be around people and still feel a part of it, not feel, you know, I can still connect with my friends who they have a handle on it and they can take or do and be okay with it, you know. And so I think it's important to realize that it's amazing to still be able to be a part of it in a healthy way, but also have the choice. I don't need to.
You know, some people aren't able to.
Yeah.
And some people are able to dabble in it and not have an unhealthy relationship with it. But being able to be sober and not be judgy, I think,
Ever,
is really
ever,
good.
especially with all of it, I always say, for the grace of God, there go I.
You've experienced it all.
All. So I think to be able to show compassion and embrace it, and then also create the sober spaces for us outside of nightlife to where it is a daytime thing or early evening thing, to where the substances or alcohol aren't the primary source of whatever. It's like, let's talk about how are you? Let's talk about life, your mental health. How are you? How can I help? Or, you know, and really ask people. I encourage people not just to say hi, say, how are you? Make eye contact and really mean it. We all need to be heard.
I have one more question, which I actually meant to ask you at the very beginning.
Yes.
You are Chad Curry. That is your name, which, you know, it's not like it's your dead name or anything. It's something that you refer to yourself as Chad as well.
Yes.
But your Instagram name and your DJ name and your other name, let's say, is Dach Dermur.
Yes.
Am I saying it correctly?
Dr. Yes.
And can you tell me where the inspiration for that name came from?
Yes. Do you know?
No.
Oh, okay.
I actually don't know.
So Dach is very simple. Dach is Chad backwards.
Oh my gosh.
But I feel
Mind blown.
I feel like I needed to choose my name. You know, that Chad Curry was the name that was given to me at birth, and I just felt very disconnected from all of it. I felt disconnected from the name and all of these expectations to be who
Something that you're not.
all of it, from the gender to the name to all these expectations, all of it. And I just wanted to lean into something that I knew I was, and something all encompassing and very fluid. And so to me, I just felt like just turning Chad around, because I've had so many turnarounds in my life. I've had so many 180s, 360s, full circle. And I'm like, I wanted to symbolically turn my life around with the name that was given at me at birth and just say Dach. A lot of people think it's Dahc Dermur, Dach. And I'm like, no, it's Dach actually.
It's Dach.
And then the latter is murder with the syllables turned around. And that was very specific. So Dermur is murder with the syllables.
Dermur, murder. Okay, yeah.
So DERMUR. So the MUR, you know, and so it's just dissecting the word murder, because I believe that.
Did you murder Chad?
Yes, I did. I did. And that's not why I went to jail. She's still here. You know, embracing death, and just, I think it was Deepak Chopra that says the greatest creative act that anybody can undertake is the art of creating yourself. And I believe that actually daily, you know, in rebuilding yourself daily and embracing kindness and love and compassion and all these things, all of these healing components that I think cohesively are vitally important for us to build a better earth. We need to embrace all these things. And I think the way that we do that is to die to ourselves and create ourselves every single day. You know, murder sounds quite aggressive, but it's actually, it's disassembling who we may have been born at birth into.
You've deconstructed the word murder as well.
Yeah.
You haven't flipped it in the same way.
Yeah, deconstruct it. And I think that's also what I've done to myself, my life experience. That's why on my t-shirts it says on the back, it's, I am not what happened. It's Carl Jung. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So all of those other versions of me, when my father, I think, asked initially for forgiveness.
Oh, he did?
He has in recent days, because his health is deteriorating, but it came with a punch. And that's kind of, there has been quite a reckoning of, we're building a bridge to forgiveness. But initially it was, forgive me because I'm ashamed of who you are today and it's my fault. It's all of the abuse. And so forgive me because I'm ashamed of who you are today, and I can't accept that.
It's not really an apology.
It's not. And so I'm not what happened to me. All of these summations of violence and abuse and all of these things, I am who I choose to become. And that is a choice we all have. For me to choose happiness, for me to choose my authentic truth every single day, that to me is success. To be able to wake up and have the liberty to do that. So, yeah.
Well, Dach, you are doing God's work. You really are.
Thank you.
The high
Thank you.
priestess.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for
Of
being on
course.
Bodies in the Post. It's been an absolute honor.
It's been an honor. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh my God, you did, but that's the whole point.
gosh.
That's the whole point. I
Okay.
want you to talk too
Okay,
much.
thank you.
There is no too much.
Thank you. And thank you for embracing my truth and my story.
Oh my
and
God,
for
I'm so thankful that you've been
It's an
so
honor.
honest and open,
Yeah.
and it's incredible to hear your story. And what an incredible
you.
story!
Thank you.
You're an inspiration.
Thank
You
you.
really are. You're an icon.
Thank you. I'm very, very grateful. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Of
Just
course.
one last thing. Tell us where people can buy your T-shirts.
Yes. Now that I've done like a little plug for my merch online, if you go onto my Instagram, Dach Dermur the 8th, and 8 is also on there because it's the number of infinity. The link is in my bio. I have a little shop with prints and
Great.
T-shirts.
I'll put the link in the show notes for this podcast.
That's very kind. And there's other stuff in there like the interview with Vogue and other things that tell kind of more about me. But yes, if you go to my Instagram, and I'll always follow you back. But yeah, thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yay.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Bodies in the Post with Dach Dermur. And thank you so much to Dach for their time, their honesty, and for the wonderful conversation. I'll see you all for season 2.